Hey, I'm gonna do something different in this video. I thought I'd give you a small behind the scenes of what's my thought process, what are the topics I'm considering, and what's sort of in the immediate plans for next videos coming out. Thanks so much for being here on the journey. The idea here, editing, those videos, they're done. They've been recorded, they're ready to go pretty much. I'm just cutting down things, I'm adding the B-roll footage, I'm gonna do some little sound effects here to make it a little bit nicer, and then I'll get it off to the viewers. So recording section is for what's already past the writing stage. Is it a script that's written, or in this case, is it a freestyle that we have? Writing section, those are ideas that I really want to work with, and I'm kind of going to begin to add some additional content there and kind of prepare it as a script. Listed defense companies. So, a lot of these startups, they don't really have content just yet. So it's best to maybe compile them together to give everyone just a theme of some occurrences. So Hermes, really cool example of someone trying to do, not necessarily similar to Boom Supersonic, but building these incredible Mach Plus engines so that they can have really fast, aviation planes, if you will. They're working on products like Quarter Horse, Dark Horse, just some really cool stuff, and they have a bunch of videos on engine testing. Then we have Castellian. That's a really cool company that's just straight up building missiles, if you will. They're doing that in a totally different approach. They're a startup, they're not Lockheed, and I think it's not just missiles, they're hypersonic. So yes, you can think of sometimes missiles as destruction, but in the case especially of hypersonics, they're deterrents. They're people knowing that we have the capability, so they're not going to antagonize, they're not going to mess up, and basically bring potential trouble on them because of the threat and retaliation response that maybe can be assumed when you have this type of tech on your side or for your country, for your defense teams. Mach Systems, this is like Fury, this is Anduril's Fury type equivalent, like autonomous jets. Then we have Firestorm, they already are launching like loitering systems and other types. And then the software side, there's Chaos and Vanaver. Translating, yep, nothing written here, but there's some amazing, this whole theme of avatars, whether it's companies like Synthesia, in fact, there's gotta be 2 or 3 more that I can think of, but HeyGen is really the one that comes to mind that I love because they didn't start as generating synthetic avatars. They started with amazing transcription and basically amazing translation.
iPhone versus Android video. De acuerdo. Bienvenido al video definitivo de iPhone versus Android. D'accord. Bienvenue dans la vidéo finale de l'iPhone versus Android.
So, I want to translate 1 or 2 of my videos, see how their product goes, but it's something that really means a lot to me. I've actually been on a 4-year Spanish-speaking journey, so I'm quite good. And about a 2.5-year Italian journey. So yeah, things are really interesting to me when it comes to languages. And that's something that if you think about all the content on YouTube, how much of it is English-centered? And if you only speak one language, you're not going to search the terms that would allow you to be easily exposed to other languages like Spanish, or definitely a massive Indian population that's searching videos in Hindi, and even the same for the Pakistani folk out there. So altogether, really interesting topic. And then we have some other ideas, again, connected to the consumer. I have Meta Ray-Bans myself. I think that is almost not necessarily the equivalent of Pokemon Go in the AR, definitely very far from that, but that might be the most practical wearables that are just awesome glasses, they're lightweight, they have crazy good speakers, funny enough, they have really good cameras, and quite literally, if you ask Meta AI to help you, you can stare at an object and it will classify that for you. All of Meta's LLMs are going right into their Meta Ray-Bans, and it's crazy. But we're not done there. There's a whole bunch of other companies, and even that Project Aria, as you might see for when I have Meta Reality Labs over here, Project Aria by Facebook. Sorry, Meta, if you will. And then we go on to areas like the hollowing out of America. How did I think about that topic? Well, sure, it's in common discussion. How do we rebuild manufacturing? What about jobs lost over the past maybe 30, 40-ish years of globalization? But what really made that stand out to me is where wealth was in the 50s and 60s. In some of the richest parts of the United States, it was cities like Detroit, actually cities like Cleveland, and what a change that is to where we are now, where New York, San Francisco, New York, of course, finance hub, San Francisco, of course, tech. It's something that I would have never thought, even with all the knowledge we had about what Henry Ford did, the big auto age, all of the steel and heavy industry work that happened in that area, it'd be an easy story to tell. Same thing with his greatest innovation projects. I was just in California not long ago, and if you're going along the Pacific Coast Highway, I guess the one or whatnot, around that San Francisco area down to Big Sur, you go across an amazing, amazing bridge. There's similar bridges throughout, like this one I saw in a video in Portland. That's not it. There's a bunch of stories, infrastructure from the early 1900s, the Hoover Dam, Empire State Building, things that we really can't imagine happening. The first parts of the New York Metro. I mean, even Disney World for that matter. Ideas where people just kind of built them. They built them really fast. Assuredly, there wasn't the same safety standards, but regardless, how can we ignore how much slower things are to build because of maybe environmental protection agencies, because of maybe one or two groups of community members who can make a loud enough voice to impact the development based on a location for the rest of the community who could really benefit. That's a classic story you have in crazy cities with crazy zoning principles. You can look at California Railway as a great example. Billions and billions of dollars and maybe one usable track, 1 mile of usable track of railroad. It's quite honestly a laughingstock, and it's just because you can look to our Asian countries, how they're building rapidly, and you can look to countries like Spain and countries like France who build really well metros and downtowns and rail, and they do it for much cheaper than what we're building it as. So it's something that's important, but also just appreciating the built world of the past and these really ambitious projects. You know, I saw recently AI drone beats a drone racing league pilot. I'm talking FPV drones where you're wearing the goggles and you're controlling it, looping through all sorts of cool things. And sure, we know the answer. Yes, AI is going to be a better driver. AI is going to be a better pilot. I actually did the video recently showing the DARPA project dating back at some point, maybe a couple years now, 3 or 4 years in the past. But when you see it from the drone perspective, especially with the threat of these drone swarms, that's kind of crazy. I don't want to say scary. It's absolutely frightening in that regard. So that was something I really want to maybe touch on. I don't know if it's long enough for full feature or anything, but quite shocking when you hear that, and I'm sure we're going to see more and more data out of it. By the way, I like FPV well beyond military. I have one myself. It's fun to fly. It's quite crazy. It's a video game. It's bird-like flying experience, and you get some of the most beautiful videos in the world. And when we look to a couple here and just the idea stage, you know, practical effects, unspoken stages, mechanics. If we think about movies, we really don't know what is going into them. While we may move to a future with LED and virtual production where you take out a lot of background elements, the world of physical and practical effects is so impressive. The amount of engineering that sometimes you'll see employed at Disney, where it might just be a small group of a handful of masterful engineers that understand mechanical, they understand hydraulics, they understand electrical, and they write some code. It truly is impressive when you see these individuals make something bespoke for a movie. ILM, the company that, I guess, George Lucas's company that was sold to Disney, they've done so much impressive practical effects type works that it just is beautiful. It's amazing, and we don't maybe get enough of the behind the scenes to really respect what goes into some of those cinema masterpieces. There was a company called Forward. It was absolutely the best doctor experiences I've ever had. It was this clean office with giant HD TVs that were automatically transcribing the conversation you were having with your doctor. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out with insurance. You had to pay that as a membership service, something that I was getting charged roughly $150 or $180 a month for upon launch, and surely they were losing money on that. You just couldn't get them insured under regular programs, so unfortunately, their cost just maybe didn't make sense. And they tried to release the healthcare pod, something like the AI pod that can be put into a mall or a more common place, and it seems like the funding for that just didn't work out, maybe the customers, maybe the regulation, but ultimately that gave me a glimpse of what really should be. We shouldn't dread going to the doctors, dread going to the hospital, be afraid of what we're going to end up paying, not be clear, run through this administrative hurdle of scheduling, canceling, reorganizing appointments. It's just, that's a lot, and it doesn't seem necessary in most cases. And then we have the Peter Thiel web that follows. I'll give you just 2 small anecdotes. It seems that, year over year, it's clear that the Thielian, if you're on tech Twitter, you'll kind of get the sense, Thiel's universe, if you will, this web of people connected to Peter Thiel, are getting in higher and higher places. Literally, the Vice President of the United States, even dating back to Trump's first election in 2016, Thiel was a huge early person on that. Then we have his interesting membership on Facebook's board, on Meta's board, where there's tech emails going back to saying, hey, we need to start thinking about rebranding Zuck because the platform's going to age its users into this new audience. Maybe that's not Thiel necessarily saying it, but there's this just interesting conversation happening. And then year by year, it starts manifesting in Mark Zuck that we've seen today. So very funny stuff there. Batteries, just one quick example. This area is super interesting. Tesla does have some of their own batteries, but CATL and the batteries out of China are the vast majority. So if you think about this EV move, it's great and it might be cleaner, although there's plenty of arguments to be made that how all the elements and the rare earths that go into the batteries is pretty dirty. How you discard the batteries is pretty dirty. There's a lot of maybe complications and maybe we are oversold part of that vision, but no matter what, it's here. We don't need government subsidies anymore. Electric is here. And with that, we have to think about the supply chain. And who does the supply chain better than anyone else in this area? I mean, when it comes to batteries, it is CATL, and it is what seems to be, the Chinese manufacturing market for that. So when we move to this EV era, the biggest and one of the most important components of it is just completely dominated by one side. Sure, Panasonic and probably a couple Korean companies, and again, Tesla, but something very important to think about there. And we already did satellite imaging stuff. The rest are just maybe a couple companies that do cool drone stuff or are making cool defense. So hopefully you all like this behind the scenes of some of the ideas that I'm thinking, some of my just random rolling thoughts here. And yeah, appreciate the randomness and commentary of this. If you ever want more videos, these are infinitely easier to make than writing the full script out. I can still polish them up a bit and maybe I will shift a little bit to this, but truth be told, I really just love having good B-roll that kind of communicates the visual of the verbal point I'm trying to make. And I've always been a fan of those videos. They've always been engaging, so I really started with there. But should we need to go into any other longer form, I'm happy to do so if it could provide value to someone or if someone's just curious around these rants and these just random stream of consciousness, if you will. So thanks for joining this one. And yeah, I hope you have great insight into the process here. So cheers. Have a great one.